Welcome to the Fright Files. Good evening. My name is Chris Harmon, but as per normal, you can call me Dr. Fright. Tonight we have a very special frightful guest. His name is Carl Supp, and he is going to be telling you some amazing stories here tonight in one of the most frightful episodes you may ever experience. Carl Supp is a software consultant, architect, developer, and analyst, and an avid Bigfoot researcher, working in the mountains of Arizona for many years, also researching in other states including Maryland, Wisconsin, Iowa, Illinois, Missouri, Michigan, and Georgia, Texas, Oklahoma, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey, and New York. He has also been fortunate enough to interact with and witness multiple subjects over the years. Carl also had decades of audio analysis and editing experience and assisted in helping M.K. Davis clean up and enhance audio from VHS tapes. He has been studying and discovered the presence of infrasound with those recordings. Carl also maintains physical and digital collections from the Mike and Sandy Sales site. David Lippin, Bobby Short, Dennis Gwern, and Steve Sommer. During his research in a remote area of Arizona while following a trackway of 15 by 6 prints for over a 1 1/4 mile to an overlook, he found a series of blood droplets that were just starting to coagulate below a wide ledge that had a large butt print with rebounding grasses on it. Later review of the trackway photographs showed blood droplets in the left foot impressions. The samples were collected using forensic techniques and have been securely stored and frozen since acquisition. Carl likes chasing the unknown, one enigma at a time. Good evening, Carl. Welcome to the Fright Files.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And the chat room here tonight is already starting to boil over. We got a lot of people in here ready to say hello to you. This is going to be an amazing hour. And if you have any questions during this show for Carl, please put them in the chat. We'll be sure to have Carl answer them. And so, Carl, how did you get started in this world of the unknown and chasing Bigfoot?
Well, it was really funny when I was a young kid. In February of 1968, my dad had a subscription to Argosy magazine, and I remember an edition of that magazine came out in February. That the front cover said California's Abominable Snowman, and it had all kinds of stills from the Patterson-Gimlin film Encounter. And I remember I read that numerous times, right? But of course, at that time, I considered it was, they likely were only up in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California, and I never really gave it much more thought. Fast forward to 1977, I remember watching, going to a local theater that was, actually playing Star Wars, and they had like a double feature, and they were playing In Search of episodes. So I actually saw the In Search of Bigfoot with Leonard Nimoy, and that and that gave me, it was okay. It's possible. This is interesting. It was always consideration, and I've always had a scientific mind, and really examined all data points of things that occurred. And then by 1982, I was camping on the Mogollon Rim here in Arizona with 3 friends, and we had an inflatable Zodiac boat that we had paddled across the lake and pitched a tent and set up camp right on the edge of the lake. And 3 in the morning, something howled just incredibly loud, incredibly close. It felt like, and of course, you really didn't have subwoofers at that time, but it certainly felt like, if recounting back on it, that the bass was just unbelievable, coursing through us, and all three guys at 3 a.m. in pitch black darkness jump out of the tent, and we're trying to decide whether or not to get in the inflatable boat, just leave everything, and start rowing across the lake in the dark. And and we ended up convincing ourselves that maybe it was just a large coyote, or whatever, and we ended up getting back in the tent after a while. But I really never considered that. That was just a strange thing, right? But because why would there be Bigfoot in Arizona, right? And of course, and it wasn't until about 2008, I'm sitting on the couch. My son was 16. He's sitting next to me on the couch, and on TV comes a Messing with Sasquatch commercial. And it was the one where the Sasquatch is walking along the road, and they try to, hey, buddy, want to ride? And then they keep pulling the car forward until the Sasquatch gets frustrated and yanks the guy out of the window. And I laughed, and my son wasn't laughing. And I said, why aren't you laughing? I said, that was hilarious. And and he says, well, it's not real. And I said, well, how can you say it's not real, right? If you haven't gone out and looked, or what, and so I recounted the 1982 episode where I heard this howl at 3 a.m, right? And he says, come on, Dad, in Arizona. And I said, I don't know, let's take a look, right? So I went online, I typed in Google, I just Googled Arizona Bigfoot, right? And the first link that came up was the Bigfoot Field Research Organization. And as we perused all of the sightings that had been recorded in Arizona, I saw that there was a link to what they call the Ohio Howl. So there was an audio clip on the website. I clicked on that, and all the hair on my arms stood up. It was pure auditory memory of, it was the second time in my life I've heard that howl. And my son saw the hair standing up on my arms, and he said, yeah, maybe there is something to this, right? So, and that was at the moment that I realized that there was an expedition coming up in 3 weeks in Arizona. So I signed us up for it. I said, worst case scenario, you and I will get to go camping in the woods for 4 days, 3 nights, and and maybe just hang out with a bunch of crazy people, or maybe we'll learn something, right? So we get up there, and the very first night, and it turns out Matt Moneymaker was leading the expedition that year. He did a howl from this ridge line, and from our position, we heard 3 distinct howls that replied back to him. One from the north, about 2-3 seconds after he howled, one about maybe another 2-3 seconds after that from the northwest, and then about 7 seconds after that from the southwest, and varying distances that the replies came in. And I had a recorder going, so thankfully I've got that recorded. But I'm telling you what, that was at that moment I said, I need to figure out what's going on, right? So I started applying, spending a lot of time up in the woods, and connecting with other researchers, and that's really what started the whole thing.
Well, I always say all it takes is one sighting or one encounter to make a person a believer.
Absolutely. So it was later than that. About a year later, I was up there with both my kids, my daughter and my son, and my nephew, who was 12 at the time. And the 3 of us went out during the day. We went hiking. We set up a lot of my remote recorders that I had built, which were in waterproof cases, and I'd pin the GPS on them so I wouldn't lose them. There was one time I didn't do that, and it took me a while to find the recorder because they're camouflaged. But that doesn't seem to stop the Sasquatches, because they would find them and tap on them like at 2, 3 in the morning down in these remote canyons of Arizona. But that evening, we went out to a location that actually had, I went out there and I was following BFRO protocols, right? I went out there and I did a couple knocks, and after I did that, about I want to say a quarter mile to the west of us, across this canyon, was this whoop returned, right? And my daughter wasn't feeling well. She was in the car, and my son stayed in the car with her. But so I'm out there just with my 12-year-old nephew, and the um, my nephew's like, "Are you going to answer back?" I said, "I'll do one knock back," right? So I knocked one more time, and then and he goes, "Now what?" And I said, "We just wait," right? So we waited about 25 minutes. I knock again, and the moment I knock again, the whoop comes, and it's right across the canyon from us. And then about 5 minutes later, we start hearing some scrabble going down to the creek at the bottom, something crossing the creek, and then I could hear something coming up our hillside, and then it stopped. And my nephew's like, "Are you going to knock again?" I go, "It knows right where we are." And
Yeah.
so and at that time the only night vision I had was just a simple monocular that had slight magnification, but my nephew's looking through it, and it's got an IRR light on it, but he sees something lean out from the bushes and just kind of peek out, goes back in. Did that a couple times with him looking. Then I took the scope, I looked through it, I saw something down the hill doing that, right? And then I could hear something coming in really close, just and this is why I like calling them forest ninjas, because they are so adept and adapted to their environment. But I heard something coming up, and then finally it was just quiet, right? So it's observing us. We can't see it. I know it's there. I haven't heard it move away or anything, right? So I tell my nephew, I said, "Well, let's just walk back to the car." I said, "Remember when we were hanging up, when we were out here earlier?" I said, you saw that area in the woods going down to the creek where it was completely clear view all the way down to the creek from this position." And he goes, "Yeah." I said, "We'll walk right past it." I said, "But we'll pretend like we just don't know anything's going on, and we'll just start walking back towards the car." And which is probably about 50 yards away. And I said, when I'm going to listen, and I said, "And if I hear a sound in there," I said, "I'll tell you now, and then you turn around and look." So we're walking back a little bit, and I tell him, I said, "Stop." And he stops, and sure enough, I hear one extra step. So it's paralleling us as we're going along this edge. And so we continue walking, and then I hear a twig snap, and it's in that area where there's no vegetation. And I said, "Now." And my nephew swings around and with the scope, and he's 12 years old. He's been in the woods looking for Bigfoot for 52 minutes, right? And he says, "Yep, there it is." And I said, "What's it doing?" He said, "Looking at me." I said, "Give me the scope." And he hands me the scope. And the moment I got the scope up to my eye, I only saw her take one last step just before she went behind a tree. So, I saw a profile view of her. And as she stepped behind the tree, she put her hand on the side of the tree and was holding onto the side of the tree. Well, I don't think she knew that her hand was visible. So the two of us actually looked at her hand and her forearm all the way down to the elbow, just a very light breeze, and the hair on the forearm was swaying, not matted, just pretty much like our hair, and the IR light was reflecting off the fingernails. You could see the hairs on the fingers, and somebody always says, "Well, what were the fingers like?" I said, "About like ballpark Franks." I mean, they were pretty big, but the fingernails were very chewed and broken at the edges, and of course the slight magnification, but we were only 30 feet away from that tree is where our position was. So that's pretty close, and especially with some magnification. But finally she took her hand off the tree, and then I couldn't see her at all. So the two of us just sat. I had him sit down on the ground. I tried talking. I tried a couple of, I clacked a few rocks. I didn't know, right? I mean, this was my first encounter and first sighting.
Exactly.
So I was trying a bunch of different stuff, and then I started hearing some other sounds and the few twig snaps that were up the canyon wall up behind us past the car. And I started thinking about what would my sister-in-law say if my 12-year-old nephew was eaten, because they are omnivores. And I decided to get back to the car as fast as we could. But boy, the moment we got back in the car, my nephew uncorked like a bottle of champagne. He just couldn't say enough, and I asked him, I said, well, what, when you turned that first time, what did you see? And he said it was looking at, because he was just looking right at the face, and he said it was looking at me, and it went like this, like shocked that he was looking at it, and the moment that when he said it turned, it was surprised, and then turned and rotated and looked down the hill like, well, you mustn't be looking at me, you're looking at something behind me. And then when it turned back, and that's when he said, looking at me. And that's the moment I got the scope. So it was just literally, she only took like 2 steps and was behind the tree when I caught a glimpse of her. So anyway, that of course spurred me on, right? Because now I've actually seen one, and later on, when we went back and measured at the tree where the hand was. Now, the reason why she put her hand on the tree was because the slope of the hill was so steep that she would have fallen backwards. There was no way that without hanging onto that tree. So she actually
Right.
was hanging onto that, and the height of where the hand was on the tree was 69 inches. So in my estimation, and there was about I want to say probably a 6 or 8 inch drop in elevation from behind that tree. So, and if you're going to hold on to the tree, you'd probably hold it at shoulder height. So I estimated she was
Right.
probably at least 7'4", 7'6", somewhere in there. So
Sure. So what feelings were going through your body when this was happening? Did you feel excited, scared,
I
positive, negative?
I was I want to say enlightened. I was not scared, but I was enlightened and tenuous at the same time. And I think if I was by myself, which some other sightings that I've had, I've been by myself, but it was, it was, I wasn't scared. I really wasn't scared. And that's pretty much been my mantra throughout all the different encounters and sightings that I've had. I just, I've always been, like I said, inquisitive and approach everything with more of a scientific view. Yeah, so it was astonishing. It was, I want to, like I said, enlightening. It really opened my mind even more to the possibilities.
And it made and so that made you want to research more and learn more about it then, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So it spurred me on. And, and even when we actually got to my second sighting was in that same canyon. And that was a daytime
Oh,
sighting. So
daytime, wow.
yeah. And any fears that I had, was, what, really went away, because it was, when I just barely caught a glimpse of it, and I hear this, I turned, I knew it was up there but it went behind this stuff. The glimpse I caught, it could have been an elk, it could have been a deer or an elk would have kept running, right? But whatever it was that went in this brush just stopped. I didn't hear any further, clattering. So this was about maybe 100, 120 feet up the hill on this ridge line, about 1:30 in the afternoon, and it. So I took my pack off. I got my camera out. I had my camera in my hand, and I started walking towards that direction because I figured if it was a deer or an elk, it would have kept going, and I'm just going to get up there and I'm going to find nothing, right? But if it's a Bigfoot, it went into hiding and it's watching me right now, right? So I start walking I start walking towards the hill, and I don't even get to the bottom of the hill, and it erupts from this brush that it had ducked into and runs across the ridge line. So the afternoon sun is shining right behind its hair. And the only way I like to describe it is it was like a L'Oreal commercial, right? It wasn't matted or anything. The hair was just flowing naturally, but it ran so smooth. It just was gliding along that ridge line. And I want to estimate 25 to 30 miles an hour. It was surreal seeing something run that fast, that quickly, and that smoothly. Of course, I was just, it was one of those things. I've got my camera in my hand, but your fight or flight reaction takes over, and you just can't help yourself, and it was just like, and then it was like, oh, camera, by the time you get the camera up, it was already gone, it was already not visible, but it was plainly visible in between all these, the trees that were on there. So the sun was, you caught the glimpse as it ran in between those trees, and astonishing.
Now, was it making any sound as it was running off?
Just thump, 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 of the footfalls. And, but like I said, it was so fast and so quick that it was at that moment I realized they could take me anytime. If I'm out at night, whatever here, one could be on me in a 2 seconds, and they're not doing it. So they're interested in me. I'm interested in them. And it's going to be and I'm going to continue to just kind of form for lack of a better word, a working relationship with them.
I always say that if the ETs and the Bigfoots and anybody wanted to get rid of us or harm us, they would have done it a long time ago, because they've had years of opportunity.
Right. Oh, but their physicality is far outstrips ours. So if they can take you at any time, don't worry about it, right?
Right.
So it's nothing to be scared of in that aspect, and of course that's paid dividends over the years as I've continued to do research. So.
Oh, fantastic! And so, what happened next? What was your next step in going forward?
Sure. So after that, of course, after that very first sighting where I only had a non-recording, night vision scope, right? I went out and got I had a thermal that could record, and in 2011 I was helping out with the BFRO expedition here in Arizona, and we had actually a couple of the people on that expedition had daytime sightings in areas that I told them I thought was going to be a good area. But the sighting we had, it was really interesting because everybody had gotten back from this night investigation. Everybody was around the campfire when I pulled up because our group was in the furthest group. I can't remember what group we were. Group 3, I'll say. So by the time we got back to camp, everyone else, they had already started a campfire and they were all sitting around the campfire. But they were knocking on trees when we pulled up, and I was like, I'm not sure if that's a good idea right from camp here. You're going to bring them into camp, and they might be upset that you're not a Bigfoot. And so I was sitting around the campfire for maybe 20 minutes, and all of a sudden this knock, and it occurred on a tree probably less than 50, I don't know, I'll say 75 feet away from the campfire. Just kaboom. And of course, everybody jumped up and looked in that direction. And it was closer to where one of the participants had their truck parked. And so he jumps up and starts heading over that direction. And as he does, this stick comes flying out of the out of the woods and ends up bouncing off the windshield of his truck, and and misses him, but
Ooh.
certainly scared him. He came running back, and
Oh yeah.
and so at that point I was like, oh my gosh, I need my thermal. So I got up, and the leader of the expedition was going to go get their thermal as well from their van, and the two of us got up and walked. I walked towards my vehicle, and I could see it in I could see the taillights of it parked, reflecting off with the firelight. And she headed off to the west to go to the van. And I want to tell you, it was maybe I couldn't tell you the time frame, but I wake up and I'm standing in front of some bushes, just and I'm like, where am I? And then I look over to my left, and I can see my vehicle about 50 feet away from me, and I just walked someplace, and I just don't know how I got there. Right at the very same time, the woman that went to go get her thermal out of the van had the same thing happened to her. And one person
Wow.
sitting at the campfire had a loss of time where he just felt like he woke up and didn't know where he was at the campsite. So I
So
get
it
my
sounds
thermal. Yeah, I get my thermal, and we start scanning the woods, and I catch something that later on we recreated the thermal sighting with, and we the next day we actually had somebody go over there and start raising their hand until it matched the image, but the height was 7'7" that peeked around the tree. At the same time, there was
damn.
one of one of the participants actually had installed, I'm going to say, a 4-camera IR security camera system, a 4-channel on his Suburban, on top of his Suburban. His Suburban actually caught 2 individuals walking away from camp almost at that same time, where you can see something moving, and one's shorter, one's taller, and they turn, and across that distance you can see their eyes reflect the IR from those security cameras. But that was my third sighting. So that was but like I said, there was two individuals on the chain. One actually had the daytime, and another had a nighttime sighting in the group that I had let out there. So
So it sounds like everybody was affected a little bit by missing time in some ways.
yes, yeah. If it was just me, I would have said, "Oh, maybe I'm just really tired." I would have wrote it off. But when I had 2 corroborating missing time episodes, that was very interesting, and I still couldn't tell you how, why, or what. Right? So, it's like I always tell everybody, it's a data point, right? I
Right.
hold that as a data point, and I will call on that when I figure out where that piece of the puzzle goes into the into the whole research, right? So
Right. So
so
you go ahead.
no, go ahead.
So after you had your missing time experience, did you try to put the pieces together, try to figure out exactly what happened, or did you just kind of move on from there?
I moved on. Like I said, it was just it was a something very odd, right? And it took me a while before I actually really started talking about it with other people, because some people consider that woo, and where it's just kind
Exactly.
of out there, right? And like I said, it's a unusual data point, and like I said, if it was just me, I may not have ever said anything about it. But since there was 2 other people that experienced the same thing, well, of course, one of them was just sitting in a chair the whole time, right? So
Right. Right.
that's even stranger, right? but yeah, my let's see. Yeah, my next sighting, I was actually for work, and that's why I've researched in so many states. Is that I travel a lot for work as my skill set is in high demand across corporate America. And I was in Georgia. I was in Atlanta, Georgia. Now in 2010, I had gone and done some research in an area north of Atlanta called Red Top Mountain, and Red Top Mountain was it's a state park. And I'd gone up there in 2010 thinking, oh, this is going to be whatever. And the only thing I ended up finding there was deer at night with the thermal, and I didn't, there was no activity. And in 2013, I returned there because a coworker of mine was very interested in it, along with his son, and so we went. So I took them up there, and I said, "Well, this is the area. We'll go to the area that I was pretty sure that they would be in, but they weren't the last time. But
Right.
who knows?"
Right.
So we get up there, and of course, he'd taken a couple scraps of 2x4s so we could do a knock, right? And we get up on this hillside, and I'm looking down, and I don't see any heat signature. And then I notice, wait a minute, there's a heat signature kind of down in the brush. It was very obscured by this brush, but you could tell that there was a heat signature about probably about 100 120 feet away from us, down at the
Oh,
bottom of this
wow.
hill, but behind all this brush. And so we watched. I handed the thermal over to my coworker, and to his son, and they were like, "Oh, I see what you're talking about." And then I said, "Why don't you just do 2 knocks with the 2x4s?" So his son claps them together twice, and with that, the heat signature starts moving, and it moves a little further away from the brush, and all of a sudden, there was a tree right there, and it was a black walnut tree. Anybody familiar with those? They kind of grow up straight, and then they split into 2 trunks.
Yep.
This and
Yep. I
and
know those very well.
and and it in the thermal, I could see this hand reach up, and you could actually see the distinction between the fingers. It reached up into that nook of the black walnut tree, and it pulled itself up, and it starts looking around like this,
No
and
kidding.
you could see the face and everything.
Wow.
And I handed over
That had
to
to have been an amazing sight.
oh and I handed over, and it couldn't see us up on top of the hill, but so it kept looking around, and so I hand the scope over to my coworker's son, who was standing next to me. He sees it looking around, and then my
Yep.
coworker, he couldn't get the scope in the right, like, where is it? And by the time he actually got to that area, it had already dropped back to the ground again. But the next day, I drove all the way back out there again from Atlanta, just so I could get the measurements. But the distance from the base of the trunk up to that nook in the black walnut tree was 12 foot. So it had reached up 12 feet, grabbed that, and pulled itself up to look over the top of this tall brush that it had been down below. But it was apparent it was actually down there collecting or eating black walnuts that were on the ground. So,
Man, I would have loved to have been there and had that experience, because that had to have been an amazing sight just to stand there and witness that.
yep. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, my next sighting, I had gone in 2012. I had gone to. I'm sorry, I got the wrong order. So that was actually my 5th sighting. My 4th sighting was I had gone to Iowa for a car show, and I had towed my classic car back to Iowa for the shows. And on the way back, my daughter was driving with me in the car, and it was an insanely hot day in Iowa, 104 during the
Oh,
day,
jeez.
just just swampy, and oh my, it was miserable. And I posed this theorem, right? I said, if I'm hot, they're hot, so I'll bet they'll risk getting out in the daytime in order to get into a farm pond, a creek, a river, something in order to cool off, right? So
Right. Right.
from Dubuque, Iowa, we didn't take Interstate 80. We took farm roads clear across Iowa over towards Des Moines, and then headed down on I-35. But every farm pond we looked at and scrutinized along the entire path. Every creek, we didn't see anything. There was a few creeks that had people playing in them, but it wasn't a Bigfoot. But by the time we got on I-35 and we were just crossed the Iowa-Missouri border, and just north of Bethany, Missouri, I looked off to the west, and by this time the sun was probably about 4 p.m. and the sun was getting low in the sky. Well, I look over and there's in this farm pond. Initially, my first glance thought it's a big giant tree, like a mossy tree in the middle of this farm pond.
Right.
And the moment that convinced me it wasn't was when it actually turned and looked in my direction as I drove on I-35, right, with this car trailer, and and you could actually see the stringy hair that was wet. You could see the sunlight between the armpits and even a little bit between the crotch as it and it just
Whoa.
turned and but you could see the water dripping off of it, and my daughter just caught a very slight glimpse of it, but later that night when we got to Wichita and got in the hotel, I got on Google Earth, and I found the farm pond that we had seen that in and looked at the, and sure enough, there's no tree in the middle of that. And I think certainly one that doesn't have armpits, right? So that was,
Right.
that was my fourth sighting. But my sixth sighting though was that one changed my approach really on how I was going to be interacting with them. In between that time, I had a long-term contract on Long Island, New York. Well, on Long Island, I didn't.
No
Um,
kidding.
I did not. The last sighting there was a report of a wild man in 1899 at Rockaway Beach, right? And everybody was starting to sing
Yeah.
the Ramones song, right? But so it was just like, I have no idea how I'm going to find them here. So I just started randomly every night going out to different woods where I kind of guessed where they'd be. So during that time, I really ended up formulating really how they live and where they live. And that really has really helped me find them in urban areas since then. But I had really no basis to start off with. So I said, you know what, let me look at supernatural websites, right? Ghost hunting websites on Long Island. And sure enough, I find these ghost hunting reports where somebody said, oh, there's these haunted woods where a mother whose child died in 1650, and she goes out and you can
Yeah.
hear her mournful howls in the woods at night. And we went there to investigate, and rocks appeared out of thin air that were thrown at us, and so forth. And I said, well, that's definitely Sasquatch Bigfoot behavior. So I started investigating that area, which actually turned out to be the same woods that Walt Whitman kind of sat in and did a lot of writing. But
Yep.
it and later on I went to the library. I found historical content where the place was actually named because of the even back in the 1600s, that farmers that were taking their cabbages or their produce in towards New York City or New Amsterdam at that time, they actually would hear these mournful howls in these woods. It was appropriately named, but I won't give the name because I don't want everybody running out to Long Island and really messing with
Yeah,
messing with
exactly.
them there. But I so I started in that area, and I started, and as it turned out, it was very close to where my hotel was. So I it was super easy for me to go to the hotel, grab some apples from concierge, and get out into the woods. And so I started gifting them there with apples, and the apples would disappear. And of course, I couldn't tell you if it was a bird or squirrel or a raccoon or something that took the apples, but I did had put them up and
Right.
higher up in a tree. However, finally, the one day, uh, the apple was gone, and in its place was this polished quartz rock that was sitting up in the same nook of this tree, high up in the and uh, and at that moment, I was so excited. I took it into work because I was on my way into work that morning, and took a picture of it. I sent it off to a lot of uh, a lot of my other research friends, and they said, "Oh no, you should put it back." So at lunchtime, I drove back out there. I put the rock back up in the tree, and after work, I went to the hotel, grabbed some apples. I was going to, restock my gifting station, and I get there, and I but when I went back at lunchtime, I didn't put it in the nook of the tree. I put it on a stump that was about 20 feet away. Well, when I came back that evening, it wasn't on the stump anymore. It was back up in the tree, right? And that's when I realized
Oh, wow.
these gifts are for me. So, and after that, it was little fossils or interesting rocks or feathers, or it was a continually gift. And that I have that entire research documented out on ghosthuntingtheories.com. If you search my name out there, you'll find very detailed reports on that very long interaction with them. But the most interesting one was wintertime. And of course, got dark early, and this time it was maybe 10 degrees out. I got off work late. I went to the hotel. I got a couple apples, and I headed back out there, and I was going to hike into the woods in the dark and place the apples. And the uh, the moment I parked the car. The moment I started walking in on that trail, something broke a stick, and it wasn't probably less than 50 feet away from me, and I and I stopped dead, right, and I assumed that was don't come in here, right, so I stopped dead in my tracks. I was startled, but I just held the apples up in the air, and I said, "These are for you," and I rolled them down the trail into the woods, and then I returned back to my rental car, right, and where I'd parked, and I drove off back over to the hotel. The next morning, I'm going to give a ride to my two coworkers, and I get out to my rental car that's parked in the parking lot at the hotel, and there was a strip of woods that kind of connected that area over towards the hotel. I get out to my rental car, and sitting on top of my rental car on the roof, on the driver's side, is this little polished rock sitting on top of my roof. So overnight, it had actually come out there and gifted that. And the interesting thing is I had been staying there so long, I actually had a great rapport with the hotel management, and I was able to go back and review the security footage from the parking
No
lot.
kidding.
Not nothing. Could not. I mean, it wasn't the resolution wasn't high enough to see the rock appear, but nothing. Couldn't didn't see anything.
Darn.
Yeah, I know, but it was. And stuff like that. It's like I feel honored, right? That that I'm a trusted a trusted partner with them. But
Exactly.
and after that, like I said, that experience really changed, my whole attitude and the way I approach things. Um,
Well,
and I'll tell you, I'll quickly tell you my sixth sighting though. So I had gone into that canyon where I had almost in the same area where I had my second sighting, and the that I had found the wind was blowing perfectly west to east. I'm on the east side of the canyon, heading down towards the meadow at the bottom on a game trail. And I actually had my video camera in my hand. It had the flip out screen, and I'm sitting there filming as I got down to the bottom of the canyon, and I'm looking to the south, and of course I'm holding this out away from my eyes, right? So I can see the screen and so forth. And out of the corner of my eye, I see some movement across the meadow. And I'm holding it this way, and I turn my head just to look to the west, and here's this fallen tree. And at the base of this tree, there's a Sasquatch down on the ground with his knees up high, almost to his chin, and he's digging.
No kidding. Wow.
And as he's digging, I see like this, and then he goes and looks up across the meadow at me. Now, this is probably 100 feet away, 120 feet away. Now, I'll tell you, it felt like we locked eyes for 3 minutes. It was probably only maybe 2 seconds, right? But
Right.
I'm looking right at his face in daylight. It's right about 2 p.m., I think. And stares at me, and with that erupts. Now imagine something that's down on the ground, almost its butt touching the ground, right? And he came up, and full size, at least 8 foot tall, and turned, and
Jeez.
the very first step he took from that squatting position was 6 feet away. And he took one more step, and he was into the brush. But by the time I actually turned the camera that direction, all you hear is just crash, boom, bam, boom through the woods on the video. But
Holy Lord.
yeah, but I that was quite the thing. And of course, as he came up out of that squatting position, they obviously don't wear pants, and this is why I said
No.
he. And I can tell you for absolute certainty they are not circumcised. So, but definitely it was uniform. The face had, the skin was almost a grayish color, a little bit dark, not light gray, more of a dark gray, and as well as the other body parts. So, yeah. And like I
Absolutely
said,
amazing.
yeah, it was that was astonishing. And I wish I had, obviously, if I had that on full video, that would probably, of course, nowadays everybody would say, "Oh, AI," right? But I know what I saw.
Of course. And it's one of those things where you have a sighting like that, or you have an experience like that, you never forget it.
Oh no. In fact, I have a strange photographic memory. So when I'm actually telling you this right
Same
now,
here.
I'm actually looking at it in my memory. So
All the experiences I've had with ETs and UFOs, I can tell you, it's all right up here. I can still see it like it was yesterday. In fact, the
yep.
experiences I have still go on. But so when it looked up at you, did you get any like telepathic messages from it? Did you
I
feel
did
it?
not.
Does it say
I
anything to you?
No, it didn't. It just took off. Just erupted off the ground and then ran off into the woods. And like I said, the crashing and banging and booming. If you had told me that somebody had a car up at the top of the ridge line, the same ridge line I saw the other one run across, right? Probably could have been the same
Right.
individual. And I mean, if somebody had a car sitting up at the top of that ridge line and it just pushed it off the edge and it was crashing through the brush, it wouldn't have been any quieter. I mean, it was it was incredibly loud as it moved through. It didn't care about what was in its way.
So, in your estimation, just a ballpark figure, how much you think it weighed?
I would venture a guess anywhere from 700 to 900 pounds. Had to be. Had
Holy
to be.
mackerel! That's
Yeah.
a heavy. Yeah.
The muscles alone, just in the muscular structure, unbelievable. Now you were talking about some kind of a I never I never believed in a lot of the woo stuff, right? Even though I knew a lot of people that had experiences like that. And it wasn't until 2019 I was doing some research in southern Illinois and what eastern Missouri, kind of north of St. Louis. Of course, I'm there for work, and I pegged out an area that I thought they are probably in this area. So I went, but this is in 2019. The Mississippi River had a lot of flooding, and I got to the area that I wanted to research in, but I couldn't get into it. The road that went into those woods was flooded, and so I drove around, and I just couldn't find any entrance that I could get in there. So I ended up parking on the side of the road, and when I parked on that side of the road, I got out of the car and I was going to do a whoop and see if I got a response back, right? And then I thought, you know what? This is a good time for me to try an experiment, right? So all I did is I got out of the car, I walked around the other side of the car, and no cars on the road, no, either direction. And I just thought to myself, if you're in these woods, could you please knock? It wasn't about 30 seconds later, crack, this tree knock in there. And now, obviously, it could be a coincidence, right? But I thought to myself, thank you. And at that moment, I hear a voice in my head that was not mine, and I hear, go in peace. And with that, I just waved to the darkness of the woods and I got back in my car and I drove off. Well, I had a second location that I was going to check out that evening. I went to that one, and sure enough, that one was really flooded. It was flooded a lot, much, much more than the first location. And so I was like, well, what do you do with a scientific thing, right? You try to repeat the
Right.
experiment. So I did the same thing. I parked. I got out of the car. No cars coming by. It was completely dark. I got out and I stood on the side of the road, and I thought to myself, if you're in these woods, could you please knock? Almost instantly, I start hearing something sloshing in the water somewhere deeper in the woods. And then either it was a waterlogged stick, or maybe it was just a very wet hand hits a tree. But you could hear, it was close enough that you could actually hear water droplets coming off of whatever hit the tree. So it was like splash, and then you could hear water spray off of it
Right.
in the
Right.
water. And with that, I didn't say, I thought to myself, what are you doing in there? Right. That was my thought. And in my head, I hear catching frogs. Now, that was the response. And with that, then I used what I learned the first time, and I thought to myself, go in peace. And then I got back in the car and I went back up to Alton, Illinois, and I went to my favorite restaurant bar there, which is Morrison's Irish Pub. And I had a pint
Yep.
because I had to sit there
Oh,
and
yeah.
ponder on exactly what just happened. So that really opened my eyes, right? Especially now that I had a data point and it was repeatable. Some years later, I'm at my cousin's farm in southern Illinois, just up the Illinois River, near Eldred, Illinois, and the
I know that. Yep.
yeah, and I was staying at one of the cabins there. The previous time I had been there in 2013, something visited my cabin about 3 a.m. Tried the doorknob. It was, and I could see the shadow on the curtain on the cabin, but then it ended up walking behind the cabin, which was just chock full of brush and weeds and woodfall. And anyway, it, not traversable at 3 a.m. with someone without a light, right? Um, and it looked in the back window, which did not have a curtain, and I could see the shadow across the bed, but I just decided I wasn't going to move. but
Oh yeah.
um, but 10 years later, I'm back at the farm, and I was disappointed that I didn't get a visitor in the middle of the night. So as I'm walking from the cabin to the main farmhouse in the morning, I looked up on the bluffs that they had there as I was walking along, and I thought to myself, I'm wondering if I'm being watched. If you're there, could you give me a sign? Almost instantaneously, this one single tree on the side of the bluff goes and wiggles, just shakes, and the tree's probably 20 feet tall, but it was still a sapling, and
Yep.
it shakes this one single tree, and I just kind of chuckled, and I went like this, like, oh, come on, because that's my attitude with them nowadays. And I walk about another 20 feet, and I stop, right, because I have to repeat it. And I looked up there, and I thought to myself, could you do that again? And with that same tree went and shook again.
That's proof. That's proof right there.
So I went in and had some breakfast and sat and pondered that one. so I've had some experiences with that, and it's I'm still looking for more answers, but I do know that they do have some level of extrasensory perception. So
Right, and it sounds like that they're doing their thing in their territory, and
yep.
as long as you come in peace, they don't mind you visiting them.
Right. They are, in fact, at this one location, they called themselves the Ancient Ones, and that is at the Mike and Sandy Sells site in North Texas, near the Oklahoma border. And that there's actually a documentary that's being produced this year, of which I'll be in it and doing some narration for it, and the and it was remarkable because they actually the clan of Bigfoot on that property actually, um, between the researchers and the farm owners, they actually started writing a journal back and forth where they would actually ask questions in English. Initially, they wrote back in Ogham, which is a language that died out in 4th
Right.
century AD Ireland. But knowing about that Ogham actually allowed me to go back and look at other photos that I'd found where there was unusual stick structures on the ground or sticks laid out or whatever. And sure enough, I've seen Ogham in at least 3 different states, including Arizona, where they would leave messages on the ground for probably one of their family members. So my
Right.
advice is that treat them just like another human, and you will be amazed at the results. Don't they're not apes. They are like us. So
Exactly. Exactly. And like you said, treat them like you want to be treated, and they'll treat you the same way. In fact, I've
yep,
even heard a story not too long ago, where a woman used to leave jars of Jiffy peanut butter out for them. It was either Jiffy or Peter Pan. She'd have a great big
yep,
large jar out. They'd bring it empty. When it was empty, they'd bring it back and leave it on our doorstep. Let her know they need more.
yep. And they don't apparently they don't like crunchy. So if you end up trying that, just go for the creamy peanut butter. So
Yeah, because if I remember correctly, she left them a jar of is a different brand or maybe it was Crunchy, and they let her know and that they brought it back to her and full. They didn't like it.
yep. And I also maintain the website of Bobby Short's work and a lot of her articles. It's almost a 3,200 page website, and I know it's a little outdated. It was written more in the 90s, HTML type style, but the content is well worth it and well worth your time. But it's BigfootEncounters.com. So I maintain that so that does not disappear off the internet. And it's always available as a research tool for anybody that's interested in the topic.
Fantastic. And so, looking back at all these experiences, are you going to keep researching and keep looking forward, keep looking for
Oh,
more evidence?
oh, absolutely. In fact, I'm going to be helping out with the 2026 BFRO expedition here in Arizona. So if you're so inclined to make the trip, or if you're in Arizona and you're interested in the topic, just go out to bfro.net and sign up for that expedition, and you'll get to hang out with me for a few days. So,
Sounds
but
fantastic. And
yeah, and I haven't done that since 2013. And at that 2013 expedition, I actually had a Bigfoot come in the middle of the night, and my head was up against the side of the tent. It actually had cupped my head through the tent and lifted my
no
upper
kidding.
torso off the
Whoa.
air mattress that I was sleeping on. And as I woke up, I realized my shoulders were off the mattress, like I was almost sitting up,
Yeah.
um, and as I started to just turn a little bit, realizing what was going on, it ended up letting me down, but I could feel just this large hand cupping the back of my head as it lowered me back down, and you could hear the dermal ridges of the fingers just kind of zip on the nylon of the tent, and
Good grief.
and then hear it walk off bipedally, right? And this is about 3 a.m. So,
Oh, fantastic. That had to have been a heck of an experience, even just to feel that.
oh yeah, yeah. So it was after that I realized. I mean, they understand English. They've been
Oh,
observing us
yeah.
for centuries. If they haven't picked up English yet, or the understanding, right? I mean, I thought in English,
Right.
right, and I got answers back in English without speaking a word. So, um, one of my latest sightings was up on the Mogollon Rim in Arizona, but the before I was sleeping in the back of my Yukon, and I actually, before I got into the bed, because all night I could just feel that we were being watched from this hillside. So I actually um, I actually went right before I climbed into the car. I looked up towards that hillside and I just said, I would love it if you could come down here. And I said verbally, I would love it if you could come down here and put a handprint on my car. So I climbed in and I said good night, and I climbed in and I went to bed. So I about 3 a.m, I I turned. I had just woken up, and I was wearing a Fitbit, and I actually, as I turned, it turned on, and there was like a little green biometric laser underneath the wristband, and it turned on and it illuminated the inside of the Yukon, where I was laid out, and not about 14 inches from my face, here's this face at the window looking in at me, and as I looked right at it, it backed away into the darkness and just kind of faded out, and
Oh, wow.
it and I, and was I terrified? No, of course not. I propped up on an elbow and I started looking out the window to see if I could see any movement between the trees and the starlight, and I could see the starlight was really illuminating the meadow that was out past the campsite, and I didn't see any movement at all. So, and unfortunately, there was grass up to that side of the car, so there was no prints on the ground in the morning. But at 5:15, I wake up in pre-dawn light. I open my eyes and there's this handprint on the side of the window right there, and it was 14 inches from the tip of the pinky down to the base of the thumb. So you can play along at home with that. Just get out a ruler, and the tip of the pinky, the top digit of the pinky, was 1.25 inches across, and you can see the dermal ridges and everything. Of course, I do have photos of that. I have a later photo that I took where I actually placed my handprint in the middle of it, and don't have slight hands. I mean, I'm 6'5". Um, it
Right.
um, it's it was remarkable. Oddly enough, that evening, my friend's Suburban, there was a handprint left on his car in the dust of the hood, and that was uh, and that handprint has dermal ridges. Interestingly enough, you can really see that there was a cup in the center of the palm, just like ours, right? But you could see hair, wisps of hair in the dust off of the wrist and off the side of the hand as well. And but that handprint was only 11 inches from the tip of the pinky down to the base of the thumb. So it was two different individuals um, that came into camp that night. So, but
Unbelievable.
that was the closest sighting I've had. Just not even as close as about as close from here to the camera that I'm looking at right now for this podcast. It was its face was right there. I mean, it was amazing. Large eyes, um, but like I said, illuminated in green, which was intriguing just because of the Fitbit. So,
Unbelievable.
yeah,
Unbelievable. And you've had some amazing sightings, and and I'm sure this year you'll have a lot more because this year is just getting started still. So
it is. It is. It really is. In fact, in northern Arizona, and I know everybody thinks about Arizona as just desert and sand dunes and so forth, but it's not. It's there's a lot of forest. In fact, half the state is forested, and it has the largest stand of ponderosa pines in the world here. So it's quite forested, and when we go up there, areas that we are in, a lot of times you don't see another person for the entire weekend. It's remote areas, and even if there are some people camped, I always, from a scientific approach, I always drive an entire circuit around where the research is going to occur, just to make sure that I locate and note where campsites are, how many people are at those campsites, and then direct a lot of our investigation away from those sites, or at least note that don't go over in that area. You don't want to get shot by somebody drinking or having a party over there, right? So,
no, exactly. Well, this has been such an amazing time. Is there anything you want to discuss that we haven't got to yet?
oh gosh, like one of my actually my last sighting was uh, well, okay, I'll tell you a funny story. Now, I didn't see the Sasquatch at this one, but I'd taken a friend up because for 10 years he's heard me talk about Bigfoot, and I took him up there I just said, we'll go up to my research area, and I'm sure you'll hear them, or who knows, maybe we'll have an encounter, or maybe we'll even get to see one, right? So we get up to that campsite, and this is kind of a funny story. So we get up there, we don't even get a couple lawn chairs out, and all of a sudden, um, I hear a whistle, and he's and you can hear, there's difference between a Bigfoot whistle and just a bird or whatever, because I mean, you can hear the wind going over lips. I mean, it's very distinct, and I said, that's one. And he goes, really? And I said, well, answer it back. So he whistles back just like it did, and it whistles back at him. So then I said, well, change it up a little bit, change the pattern. So he goes, like, and with that, it answers back, so this went back, and he'd go, and and it would actually mimic back exactly what he was doing. And this went on for almost 5 minutes until he kind of went, and then it was all quiet. I was like, oh great, you pissed it off, So, um, that evening, we're just sitting around the campfire, and I'd gotten out a bottle of Maker's 46, and I poured my friend a shot, because he's still trying to process all this, and I poured myself one, and as we sat there and we're just sipping on it, in the brush right behind the campfire, not even, not even 20 feet behind me, I hear I hear one coming in close. So without turning around, I've got my back right towards where it's walking up, and I tell my friend, I said, at my 6 o'clock, and he's like, I hear it, and it comes in, and about that time we just finished that first pour, and he wanted another one, so I poured him another one, and as I'm pouring mine, the brush behind me shakes, and without turning around, I just said, "Oh, do you want one?" And the brush shook again, and so I finished the pour that I was doing for myself, and I took the glass and I just reached behind myself like that, and I'm holding my arm back towards the brush, and I could hear what sounded like, if you would think about a hand coming through the brush. And
Yep.
I
Yep.
swear I was prepared to feel it take it from my hand, right? And then I could hear the hand withdrawing from the brush. And I said, "That's okay." I said, "I'll leave one out for you." So we finished, and actually poured one, and I left it out on the kitchen table. I went to sleep, right? So that uh, the next morning I wake up and the shot glass is empty, sitting on the on the table. So somewhere before 6 a.m., it came into camp, and actually took the shot, drank the shot, but left the glass. I picked it up, unfortunately, in my excitement, where I was like, I would have had fingerprints on that glass. Oh, what did I do? But
Oh yeah.
that was a pretty interesting thing. And of course, I've had people tell me, "Oh, don't give them whiskey." It's like, if they want to try it, I'm not one to deny them. So,
Well,
but
as big and tall as they are, I'm sure. As big and tall as they are, I'm sure a little shot of whiskey wouldn't affect them much.
oh no, no, not at all, not at all. I mean, it was gone, so it wasn't just like tasted it and said yuck. They
Right.
he or she apparently liked it. So, um,
Oh
but
yeah.
yeah, so, but yeah, the next morning, it's a funny story, and I'll tell you, but it's on the PG thing. But I wake up first thing in the morning, my friend's still sleeping in the tent, and I walked across camp over towards the edge of these woods across the campsite, and had to pee in the morning, right? So I'm standing there and I'm peeing, and when I finished peeing, I let out a large fart, probably about 150 feet away from me. I hear, and of course, when you think about them, right, they're like people, right? And apparently, farts are funny to them too, because from the about 150 feet away, I hear like that in the woods, and I just laughed, and I went like this to them, and I walked back towards camp. Well, the moment I got back into camp, and I said, "Oh, did you like that?" And with that, I hear two rock clacks, or what it sounded like two rock clacks, and the um, and I laughed, and I walked back to camp, and just then my friend's getting out of the tent, and I tell him the story, and he laughs, and he says, "Where was that?" I said, "Well, right over here, and and he goes, "Oh, come on." And I said, so I just said to the woods, you know, "Could you do a couple rock clacks again for my friend?" And two clacks come out of the woods, and I said, "Well, answer him." So I said, and he's looking on the ground for some rocks. I said, "No, just do like a tongue clack." So he started doing that, and that went on for about 5 minutes.
No
where
kidding. Holy
where they
mackerel.
had back, and it was a combination of just going, and it would, and they'd mimic it perfectly back, and it was and it's interactions like that I find the most rewarding, right? I've had 13 sightings total. I don't need any more sightings. I'd rather have these interactions, because I learn honestly far more from that than than anything that I can from a sighting, right? I mean, like I said, I've seen seen them at daytime, I've seen at night, I've seen thermal, and it's um it's I've seen them up close, right, through the window. But it's like I said, it's been an interesting journey for sure.
It definitely sounds like it. And I got to say thank you for coming here tonight, because this has been such an amazing time with you here. And I've learned so much and heard so many amazing stories. And tell the viewers where they can find you at, where they can locate you.
Sure, sure. So, just go out if you want to look at any of my other podcasts that I've done for other people. You just go out onto YouTube and just search for Carl Supp. I think I'm the only Carl Supp out there. But a lot of my research, especially out of the urban areas in Chicago and from Long Island, those entire research documents are out on ghosthuntingtheories.com. So it's quite the series out there, and there's a lot of other great information on that website as well. And be sure to come out and take a look at bigfootencounters.com. And if you're really interested in the topic, I certainly recommend purchasing Bobby Short's book, which is the De Facto Sasquatch. And there's a volume 1 and 2, and that's her entire life's work encapsulated in those books. So,
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much. And you can find me all across social media just by researching Chris Harmon, UFO, or Chris Harmon Psychic. I do all sorts of things, including hypnotherapy. I'm all across social media, videos, and what have you. But this has been such an amazing hour. And don't forget to like and subscribe here to Bigfoot Outlaw to get notified when the next episode comes out. There's a whole lot of great content here on Bigfoot Outlaw, and many more wonderful things to come in the future, as well as more episodes of the Fright Files coming up. We got another special guest coming up in just a few weeks. He'll be here. He's a armed service gentleman who's got some amazing stories as well. Look forward to seeing him. I don't want to give out too much right now. Save it for a surprise, but it's going to be an amazing time. And thank you so much, Carl, for coming here tonight.
You're more than welcome. I really enjoyed it.
We've really enjoyed our time here. And of course, my co-host, my beautiful assistant, Madam Mina, could not be here tonight. But she's will be back here this coming Monday for another fantastic episode. And with that being said, do you have any final words, Carl, you want to say to everybody?
Just stay squatchy and treat them with respect. And just as if you were visiting your neighbor, you wouldn't do strange, weird things with them. And with that, you'll get the respect back as well.
Amen. As I always say, keep your eyes to the skies. You never know what you're going to see out there. The whole world is full of unknown things that people tend to think that, oh, they're not real. It's just all just a make believe. Then they have that one first encounter, and everything changes for them. They go from being a skeptic to being a believer, just like that. And with that being said, I want to say thank you, Carl, and thank you to everybody who's been here in the chat room tonight. And this has been the Fright Files with Dr. Fright and Carl Supp. And we'll see you on the next Monday on our next episode.
Awesome. Thank you.
Coming to a YouTube channel near you.